Sometimes we all need a break from the deep and heartbreaking support conversations that this series spoils us with. If every support conversation ever was as emotional as Dimitri and Marianne's, I think we'd all lose water weight from the amount of tears shed every time we opened up the support menu. Thankfully, Fire Emblem also often likes to bask in its levity and its brevity, as the following support conversations provide no reading between the lines for some deeper meaning. They're sometimes just gag supports and are bizarre or hilarious to say the least. Let's analyze some of the most hilariously absurd and silly supports in the series, starting with Sin and Dorothy. But let's get some background info on these characters. Sin is a very po-faced and terse Sakaean, and hardly ever shows emotion. Dorothy is a very shy young girl, talks to herself, doesn't have a lot of friends, and doesn't have that much self-confidence. The common traits that these two share pretty much just extend as far as they are both quiet and use bows in battle. Anyway, this is their C support. All of it. Why am I hiding here? I want to talk to him, but he's a little forbidding. I'd like him to teach me how to improve my bow skills, but how can I talk to him? Well, maybe some other time. This support speaks for itself. Dorothy wants bow advice, but is struggling to find a way to ask. She's intimidated by his cold demeanor. Their B support is another strike. She is thinking out loud ways to break the ice, but is getting nowhere. Sin actually appears, says nothing, then literally leaves. Well, it turns out he was listening, but just didn't stop her from rambling. Hello, Sin. My name is Dorothy. A little intrusive? Would you like to have an archery duel? But I don't want to compete with him. What a nice bow. Where'd you buy it? No, that doesn't sound right at all. This is tough. Oh, I know. I can bring him some food that he likes. Wait, I don't know what kind of food he likes. I like fruit. What about him? In the A support, our brave little archer girl works up the courage to speak to him, but she stumbles hard. This support seems to be a direct follow-up to the B, or is just another instance of her mumbling to herself. Anyway, Sin is here again, just chilling. She tries to ask what food he likes, but Sin just says fruit and tells her he knew because he overheard her fretting about it last time. He assures her that she shouldn't hesitate to approach him, as they are both in the same army, and that makes her happy. Congrats, Dorothy, you did it. You spoke to Sin. You didn't ask about the archery thing, but this is a good start. It took you an entire support chain to speak to him, but better late than never, as they say. There's hardly any characterization happening here, but what you do get is pretty on brand for both. And at least it ends with Dorothy making an ally in someone she was afraid of. However, you could literally read the C and B support in one breath. Anyway, Veda and Dorcas. Veda is a former general of Bern who is devoted to protecting Prince Zephiel, but she later joins the heroes on her own personal agenda and to help them as they were the ones who protected Zephiel from the Black Fang. Veda is an obnoxiously vain and arrogant woman of Bern, and in the moments of emotional vulnerability she does have in her supports, she often brushes them aside angrily towards her partner, not being honest with her feelings and visibly resists being affectionate. Dorcas is Dorcas. He's a kind, quiet, and honest guy with a wife in Kalen, and not much else. Now then, what do you get when these two relentlessly opposed personalities clash? An opposites attract kind of deal? Maybe a different personalities but bonding over being from Bern kind of thing? Nah. Can't really bond when you literally don't speak to each other. The premise of the C support is that Eliwood thought Dorcas and Veda would get along with each other, so he coordinates them to meet in a specific place. However, their C and B is entirely spent on the fact that they keep missing each other. To meet his pal Dorcas. The one with the pretty little thing fretting at home. So why'd he leave her? The big oaf? If I know men, it's because he's another scoundrel. Not again. But I checked the place and time. Veda was supposed to be here. The one who betrayed Bern for Prince Zephiel. She would give anything to discharge her duty to him. They say she is pure, but a bit too idealistic. Ideals. Ha, she must be young. Their B support is them missing each other again, but this time assuming the utter opposite of one another. Dorcas assumes that Veda's idealism probably comes from the fact that she's young and impressionable, when she's of course not that. Veda accuses Dorcas of being a womanizer because he might be off trying to swoon other women, which is Not him. But finally, in their A support, the stars finally align. A pure girl who is true to her ideals. Surely it can't be her. Huh? What are you mumbling about, ape? Nothing. I beg your pardon. Hold there. A scoundrel with a girl in every village? Surely it can't be him. Did you say something? No, mind your business. Ah, fine then. So I failed again. When is that useless man going to arrive? And that's it, folks. They meet one another, but don't introduce themselves, and instead double down on their previous assumptions, and they just walk away. The only positive we can extract from these two is that, they both have fire affinities, which means they make each other do more damage, I guess? This is unabashedly a gag support, and while comedic, I do kinda wish Dorcas wasn't on the receiving end. Veda has a slew of support partners for decent characterization and even spotlight in the main campaign. Meanwhile, Dorcas doesn't really have any of that. Anyway, this is one of my favorite gag supports in this game, so hope you enjoyed that one. Moving on. Luthier and Delphia. Luthier, rather Ryuto, as named in the Gaiden translation, is among my favorite characters in FE2. Most of the characterization he had revolved around protecting his sister. When Echoes came around, they kept the care for Delphia, but they also turned him into a socially awkward and inept individual. Such is the exchange when you spend all of your living free time studying magic and keeping track of your little sister. Delphia is of course the complete opposite, and this makes them foils for each other. She is a lazy yet incredibly talented magical little sister, which is actually a source of jealousy and frustration for him. She's a socialite, capable of making friends easily and has aspirations for the high life, while Luthier is essentially the opposite. In their supports, their personality flaws clash, with each sibling pointing out their negative traits.
I go out and wipe the floor with the bad guys, and now I get a lecture?
I'm not criticizing you, but showing a bit of dignity would be nice. For you see, the thing about you is...
Would you please shut up? Nothing I do is ever good enough for you. Just leave me alone, you big loser.
Pardon me? Hold it! You come back here right now, young lady, or I'll...
Delphia is frustrated that Luthier will never acknowledge her impact for Alm's cause and instead focuses on only her flaws, her childish, selfish, and reckless behavior. Luthier acts more like an overbearing father figure rather than a playful and boyish older brother that Delphia would rather him act like. The B support is similar bickering. They're both stubborn and frustrated with one another, but Luthier is actually the one who lacks the self-awareness here. He's shocked when Delphia calls him out, telling him that he should look himself in the mirror and work on himself instead of berating Delphia constantly about the perception of herself she gives onto others.
Well, I suppose that's true. But people will soon begin to resent you if you carry yourself in such a manner. I want you to be loved by all.
Yeah, because you're just the model of popularity around here. Maybe you should try worrying about how you carry yourself for a change.
In the A, Luthier does listen, but he sort of misses the point.
Delphia, guess what?
What?
I've finally made a friend, and it's Alm! I asked him if we were friends, and he definitely nodded.
I don't know many people who would answer that with a no, but, good for you, I guess?
Luthier, in probably one of the funniest exchanges in the game, thinks that getting Alm to confirm that they are indeed friends is enough to prove to Delphia that he ought to listen to her now. But he is way off the mark. She tells him that he needs to make conversations not revolving around his desires, but he's so inept socially that he doesn't know how else to converse with people, which is honestly pretty sad, but she does get him to compliment her, which makes her happy. What makes her happy is that the conversation stops becoming all about what Luthier wants to hear and see, but what he can do to make others happy, basically making conversations a two-way street. The conversation ends with Luthier being perplexed by this revelation of how to converse normally, but hey, at least we're getting somewhere. Now, you may be confused as to why I placed this chain on the list. It's mainly because at the end of this chain, Luthier is only slightly better than where we started. He doesn't really understand normal conversation, as it's honestly impossible to develop normal social skills or baseline conversational skills in 3 supports and be set for life. Delphia also remains indignant, but doesn't end the conversation storming off like the last 2 times. Luthier definitely got somewhere, but he has a lot to go as far as social skills go. But like Dorothy, a similarly socially awkward and shy person, progress is progress. That all said, the fact that he mentions that he definitely nodded and didn't actually affirm anything just goes to show how much Luthier just doesn't get it. And the delivery is also just complete gold. And last, Maklov and Har. We are totally not finished talking about Maklov just yet. If you recall the most hated characters video from a couple weeks ago, I very briefly mentioned that this support chain with Har is comic relief. Maklov is a lazy, drunkard gambler who often tries tricking people into giving him money that he can burn to feed his gambling addiction. Har, on the other hand, is an immensely powerful wyvern lord who joins Ike's army in hopes to avenge Shiharam's death by killing Petrian of Dayan. Despite his fierce and imposing presence on the battlefield, he's actually very serene and calm, but quite lazy and is prone to napping wherever and whenever he can. The C support starts and ends with Har sleeping. Maklov gets scared by his imposing stature and pleads with him to stay away from him, and then runs away in fear, crying out for help. Confused but ultimately too lazy to care, Har falls back asleep. In their B support, Maklov's fearfulness continues, but when Har asks him what he's doing, Maklov says he ran because he thought Har was a scary debt collector. When Har tells him several times that he's definitely not a debt collector, Maklov is relieved and explains that it was his face that scared him. But after Har asks him if he's calling him ugly, Maklov weasels away and clarifies that he's just ruggedly handsome and backs off. Har, again, notes the weird interaction, but falls back asleep. As for my in-depth breakdown of this exchange, literally nothing is happening. And the A support is just more stupid Maklov stuff. Maklov tries to get his attention, but not even the pretend threat of General Ike is enough to wake him up. He then comes to a realization. Maklov thinks that debt collectors would be scared of the ballsiness exhibited by sleeping through potentially dangerous situations. He incorrectly believes that if he develops the skill that Har does, i.e. sleeping before devastating battles, that he will never have to pay anyone again. So he falls asleep next to Har as training. But then Har wakes up, upset that his nap time is getting interrupted. He looks at Maklov, sleep-talking about apologizing to Marcia and then asking for money, and simply comments on how silly it is to be napping before a big battle. Where to begin with this? Maklov's theory is completely ridiculous, and Har is either ironically or unironically being the pot calling the kettle black. The C and B established virtually nothing, and the A is more nonsense. I'm not even sure that Har knows Maklov's name yet. Moral of the story, do not interrupt Har's naps. Or do, since he'll just fall back asleep anyway. To me, all of these supports have made me go, wait, what was that? At one point or another. But these aren't the only ones. Oh no. There are a handful to pick from. These are some of my favorites though. But now I pose the question to you. Do you have any suggestions yourself? Let me know in the comments below. If you haven't subscribed yet, but you've been seeing and watching my videos come up in your recommended feed, I'd like you to consider subscribing and hitting the bell to not only support my channel, but to also know immediately when I upload new scripted Fire Emblem videos just like this one. And with that all being said, I'll see you in the next one. Deuces.